All right. Well, Happy New Year, everybody. We're back finally after, I think, a much needed break from recording and YouTube. And not that we do it every day, but it's been nice to have some time with the family and just to relax and catch up and everything. But we're also glad to be back recording. And we got a really fun segment today. I got my friend Sykes here back in the studio with us. He hadn't been back since we did our MCU rankings, so it'll be fun to have him in here. But yeah, we're going to talk about what I'm calling our hopes and fears video for 2025, and this is just an opportunity for us to um, kind of reflect on some of the projects that are coming out this year. And the way this will work is we'll pull four movies and four TV shows up. These are all ones that we pre-selected that we're really either conflicted about or really interested about, and then we're going to label it either hopeful or fearful, and kind of discuss why we feel that way about it. Um, so yeah, we're gonna start with movies. We got four of those, like I said, and then we'll jump into TV shows. But I'm excited to see what you think on some of these because I know we haven't really discussed much of it. But thanks for jumping in and being a part of it today.
Yeah, no problem. Excited to be back. I thought I was gonna get boot off the channel after some of my Marvel takes, but glad to be back.
There might have been a lot of people that were wanting to cancel the channel altogether because a lot of us had some interesting takes, but it's nothing compared to some of the ones we've had on our Star Wars rankings. So
Yeah,
I'll at least give you that.
I've been watching those. I was kind of surprised by a few of the rankings, but I mean it's not an opinion if everyone agrees about the same thing, right? So
Yeah, and that's why we like to have different people on because you get that a good melting pot of opinions. So, but yeah, we'll jump into it. I'll pull up my graphics here, and we'll kind of just go right into the movie portion of it. All right, so like I said, we're going to start with movies, and we're just going to jump right into it. I feel like this is the movie that is probably uh, the most anticipated, also the one that people maybe are the most nervous about going into this year, and also maybe the one that has the most riding on it. Um, for a lot of different reasons. So that's going to be James Gunn's revamped or rebooted, whatever you want to call it, DCU, whatever the title. I don't even know what the title is now. Universe and his totally new take on the character of Superman. So this, just for a little backstory, obviously on this, for those of you who may not know, James Gunn agreed to a big deal. I believe it was last year. It might have been late the year before that, 2023, but he agreed on a deal to basically be the head of the DC in film, so the DC universe on the big screen. Um, and previously that was Zack Snyder. We had obviously a myriad of movies from him that had, I would say, a lot of mixed reactions is the easiest way to say it. But yeah, James Gunn. I mean, we know him from Guardians of the Galaxy. We know him from the most recent Suicide Squad movie, Peacekeeper TV show. So he's definitely well known in the realm of superheroes. And like one of my personal favorite superhero movies that is not talked about a lot that he did was Sky High. And this was one he did back in like the mid 2000s. That is I think a very underrated superhero movie. Um, so he's no stranger to this, and so I think there's a lot of people just wondering, can he make this work in with a character that's not the the archetype of what he's done with, say, Guardians of the Galaxy or Suicide Squad or whatever. A team of misfits come together. It's sort of goofy and lighthearted, and so I think rightly so. People are like, hey, can he even do more serious characters like a Superman or a Batman or some of these in the DC universe? And so as I've got our graphics set up here, we've got hope or fear at the bottom. We're going to just give ourselves a chance to kind of select one or the other. and then populated obviously in our box as under our name. So I'm curious to see where you're at with this because I know you're a big Flash guy. You're you're definitely more immersed into that. I've always been a big Batman guy. Batman's my favorite, but this is kind of the other, the hallmark of DC, which is Superman. So just give me your thoughts, kind of on where you are with it.
Yeah, I think one thing that's going to be refreshing with at least James Gunn's style is that kind of not taking yourself too seriously type of style. With what you've seen with Superman, Batman, even the Flash movie to an extent over the past decade has been a very serious DC dark style to it. Um, and from that point of view, not speaking on the Flash TV show, which is not very dark. It's more lighthearted, a lot more bright as far as how they like the film and the style. Um, but everything else has been very dark, mysterious. Talking about the Dark Knight trilogy, you're talking about the Batman rebooted with Ben Affleck, any of the Justice League. Just I'm excited to see their spin on it and his spin on it. I would love to see him take a Guardians approach, not necessarily of the comedy aspect, because as we talked about in the Marvel rankings, it's not my biggest. I don't like that type of comedy personally, but I know a lot of people did, especially you guys on when we were doing the rankings. But taking that film style, the brighter outer space, futuristic type of style, putting that into a Superman movie is something I'm interested in. I do like that this isn't an origin story per se. You're not trying to reboot everything. You're just starting at a point in time with Superman, which I do appreciate because I feel like origin stories are kind of overplayed. Like I don't think we need a Batman origin story. Everyone knows where Batman comes from. So I'm hopeful about it, but at the same time, I have some apprehension. So put me as slightly hopeful in this one.
More hopeful than fearful, you would say.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I have ridiculously mixed feelings about this movie because, like, you think about it, we obviously have Man of Steel, was the last standalone Superman movie. I remember liking it okay. Obviously, Superman's not my area of expertise. I mean, neither is Batman. I'm a normie when it comes to the comic book aspect of things. I've read more Batman comics than I've read probably any other comics, um, but yeah, I mean, I would say a lot of people took issue with that portrayal because obviously, at the end of the movie, he kills Zod, which is like completely opposed to his character, just like Batman's kind of the same way. He doesn't kill. That's kind of what separates him from the villains. And so I think a lot of people took issue with that, and I think the movie itself was okay. I mean, I think it was pretty entertaining at times. Obviously, I love Henry Cavill as Superman, but then other than that, you had obviously the Batman v Superman, and then you had the Justice League, um, which were average to below average according to most people. Not my cup of tea. I was not the biggest fan of those. But other than that, since like the original Superman films back in the day, the only one that I remember in my lifetime was Superman Returns, which came in the early to mid 2000s, which I remember liking pretty well as a kid. It's been a long time since I've watched it, so I don't know how I feel about it now, but it was a direct sequel to the original, obviously Superman movies, and obviously with a different actor playing Superman because of all the decades that have passed since Christopher Reeve was in the original Superman. But all that being said, uh, I think considering this is the first big movie that James Gunn's doing to kind of kick off his version of the DC universe, um, I've heard a lot of people say like the entire superhero genre is riding on this movie, and maybe in some ways because of the current state of it, outside of like your Deadpool and your Wolverine, there hasn't been any other hits in the superhero genre um, in a long time, and so I think that can be. I think that may be a decent assessment because um, I think there is a lot that depends on this, and there's a lot that depends on the setup of the DC universe coming off of this film. So I would say because I am generally a big fan of James Gunn and his work, I would say I'm definitely more hopeful than fearful. Um, but I would say based on the trailer, the teaser trailer they released a few weeks ago, it's a mixed bag in terms of how that makes me feel about the movie going forward because it's a very busy trailer. It introduces a lot of characters, um, and that's a little bit scary because like hey is it going to be too many plot points going on? Is it going to be too many characters mixed in for them to be able to do something really good? Because in reality, they really just need to make a really good Superman film and not turn it into this sort of almost Justice League style team up or whatever it may be. So, yeah, I would definitely more hopeful. And the more I've watched the teaser, the more I remain hopeful because there's some really good elements in it. But yeah, I think this is one that's um, I would not be shocked if it's the highest grossing movie this year. But also, it would not shock me, depending on how it turns out, if it's a huge bomb as well. So, but I'm saying if it's good, I think it'll probably make more money than just about anything this year. And
Yeah,
that's kind of where I'm at with it.
yeah. My big thing with again, the trailer is a good point. With looking at that is, I'm not sure. Well, one, I don't think the time of the movie has come out, like as far as how long, the length of it. Um, but if if you take all of those characters, because I think like Green Lantern was in there, obviously Lex Luthor. There was another character that I'm can't remember. I mean, I remember what they look like. I can't remember the name of it. The one with the mace and that has the wings. Um,
I think
I
it's either Hawk Man or Hawk Girl.
yeah. There
I
there
think that's
were,
what I heard.
and then obviously you have Krypton the dog. Um, I think that my fear with this movie is you're trying to make a statement movie and you introduce all of these characters and then the plot, you lose the entire plot because you're too busy trying to make a story for all of these people. Whereas what Marvel did when they first started was they made a standalone movie introducing one character, and then through the next X amount of movies, they slowly started introducing these characters both in their own movies and then with other movies instead of just throwing them all at you at the beginning. And I think that's where my biggest concern is you're not making a super, like you said, you're not making a Superman movie, you're making a Justice League movie that is a Superman movie, which I don't think is the
Yeah,
right way to start um, with this
because
experiment, in my opinion.
I guess you would, because like you think about like say for example Captain America, just briefly the original three. They didn't do a kind of team up with that until Civil War, and it it's very much a Captain America movie at its core. But you have these all these other characters involved. They're able to pull it off reasonably well. But that's the third movie in that trilogy. Whereas, like you were saying, this is the first one in. I mean, it could be a trilogy. We don't really know what the plan is going forward with that. I imagine if it does well, they're going to want to keep doing it. Um, but but yeah, it's an interesting. It's a bold choice for your first one to start with introducing so many characters. But I think you could also have the misconception or the illusion that the trailer makes us think these characters will be really involved, and maybe they'll just be more like cameos where he'll use short scenes to kind of set them up for something down the road, which I think would be more beneficial for a Superman movie. Um, and maybe because I mean that's just I mean that, like trailers like I was talking to somebody today about the second Joker movie that just came out not that long ago, and how like you watch the trailers and it looks like it's going to be just like the first one in its style, and then you watch the movie and it's nothing like the first one. And so they there's ways that trailers can be deceiving in that regard, and I think that that's going to be interesting to see is will these characters really be involved, or will it just be like short sequences where they just appear and then they're gone. I think that'll be the telltale thing to me, and I think the thing I'll be looking at the most going into it.
Absolutely.
All right, let's jump over to the second one. It's going to be the Fantastic Four movie. I think you could say in a lot of ways, uh, this one is almost as big, if not as big, as the Superman film. And funnily enough, they're coming out 2 weeks apart from each other. Superman is July 11th, and this one's July 25th. So um, I think the reason I'd say that about this one is obviously the state of the MCU right now is precarious to say the least. And obviously they came off of a success with Deadpool and Wolverine last year, but if you look around to everything else that they did, I think that was the only MCU film last year, was it not?
Yeah, and then obviously Agatha all along happened as far
That's
as the
true.
TV show,
And I think did
and then
was
What If
Loki
just came out.
Was Loki season 2 last year, or was it?
Yeah, it was.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I think because these characters are such iconic characters from the comic books. I mean, them and the X-Men, Spider-Man are probably the most well known of in terms of comic books, at least from what I've been told. Um, and so I think they mostly, in my opinion, get the casting right for this. I still have serious reservations about Pedro Pascal playing Reed Richards. I, I don't know. I don't see it personally. I think the other actors they cast, Vanessa Kirby, Joseph Quinn, the guy that I can never pronounce his name at all. But he was in The Punisher season 1. He was also he plays in The Bear. Apparently, I've not watched The Bear yet, um, but yeah. So I like most of the casting. I like that they seem to be going with Galactus as the villain, and which is a huge villain in terms of Marvel, like literally and figuratively. Um, but also um, just I don't know. It's the setting. It's supposed to be set in the '60s, so they're going for a more retro vibe with that, I guess. And also, I guess looking into this originally, um, John Watts, who directed the 3 Tom Holland Spider-Man movies in the MCU, he's also the one responsible for Skeleton Crew, which is out right now. I'm actually really enjoying that so far. For any of those who haven't watched it, um, I'm disappointed that he's not doing this movie because I enjoy all of those things I just listed, and I think he would do a really good job with this. They actually brought in the guy who worked on WandaVision, and I enjoyed WandaVision for the most part, but it still makes me a little apprehensive going into it. And so I'm curious to see what you stand. I would say I'm more because of the state of Marvel um, and the uncertainty around the director with this one. I would say I'm more fearful than hopeful here, um, but I don't think it's by a whole lot, if that makes sense.
I was hoping that you were going to say hopeful because I was going to say fearful, so that we weren't we weren't agreeing.
We'll
But
disagree on some other ones, I'm sure.
yeah, yeah. Um, I'm fearful for this one because the last Fantastic Four just was not good, and I would even say the prior two, they were good, like the Silver Surfer. They were good movies. If like me being younger watching those, like I'm nostalgic about those, despite them not being very good Fantastic Four movies. Like I like them because I was younger and it was a superhero movie and I enjoyed it. Um, but I it's hard for me to put any stock in the MCU based off of Deadpool and Wolverine, because Deadpool and Wolverine is ran by Ryan Reynolds. Um, and Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds combo together to make a movie. Like it's not like the MCU had, or the people that are running the MCU had a lot of say per se in that movie, in the style of that movie. That's all Ryan Reynolds doing.
Well, and they also brought, you know, Sean Levy, who did the first two Deadpools, in to direct it. It's like, I think they essentially were like, hey, whatever you did in those first two, do in this one, and then bring Wolverine in. And so, like you said, it's kind of it feels standalone from the rest of it.
Exactly. And they really, besides this last movie, haven't really been introduced in the MCU. Whereas this Fantastic Four movie is a MCU movie, where we've seen over, since, I would honestly say, since the Spider-Man movie came out after, I believe the Spider-Man movie came out after Endgame, and Infinity War, right? The last one with
Uh,
the team up.
they actually both did. Far From Home came. It was the first MCU movie
That's right.
after Endgame, and then No Way Home came out. I think it was.
Like a year and a half later, right?
Yeah, I can't remember the exact timeline, but it was something like that. A couple of years after that, maybe.
But since those movies, right, MCU's kind of been on a downward trend as far as the cinematic universe. I personally like the Doctor Strange movie, but that's a hot take from me being a Doctor Strange fan. Um, I'm fearful on this one just because there's so much writing on it for the next stage, I believe, especially with Doctor Doom being named the big villain, which means that there's going to be a lot of emphasis on this Fantastic Four movie, and a lot of, and I know Galactus is the main villain, but Doctor Doom is a Fantastic Four villain. So there's a
Yeah,
lot riding
yeah.
on this movie. Um,
He's the Fantastic Four villain.
exactly.
Really. Yeah.
Um, and I just, the Pedro Pascal character, I just, like you said, I can't see him as Reed Richards. Obviously, maybe they do something with him that kind of makes me change my mind. But when you think of Iron Man, like I can see Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, even when he was first casted. Like he just fit the character. He fit the mold. You know, Benedict Cumberbatch, I can see him as Doctor Strange. Like
Yeah.
the way he talks and how he acts, like that reminds me of Doctor Strange. Pedro Pascal reminds me nothing of Reed Richards, in the way
Yeah.
he acts, and I think he's a fantastic actor. I love him and a lot of the stuff that he works on, and I don't know. I'm fearful for it. Hopefully they prove me wrong on this one though.
Time will tell, and I think right now Marvel's in that prove it to me stage in terms of the fans, where it's like, don't expect us to just show out in droves until you can prove you can keep doing it again and again. And right now, they've got to start stringing some stuff together, and I think this is obviously this one. I think has to be a hit in more ways than one. So, um, yeah, let's jump over to our third one here. Funnily enough, it's the other Marvel movie that's coming out this year. Actually, I think there's a Thunderbolts as well is coming out. We're not talking about Thunderbolts because personally, I don't really care about Thunderbolts. We can only choose four. This one, I think, is definitely a lot more controversial because um, I personally, just to preface this, I personally was fine with the decision in Endgame to hand the shield off um, to Falcon, and like I thought it worked within the story. I know it's not comic book accurate. I know Bucky's supposed to be the one in the comics that takes over the mantle. Um, but I was fine with it, and I was actually a little excited, even though I really liked the character of Falcon, and I kind of wish he could have maintained um, that as his character, as opposed to him having to basically be almost shoehorned into a different character. Not that he was, shoehorned without reason, but it's like I feel like it's harder to make that work because he already did such a good job in the Falcon role that it's hard to transition to all the expectations of being Captain America, and Captain America always being Steve Rogers for all of those movies. And Chris Evans playing that character. Now you got him in his own Captain America movie, coming off the heels of a Falcon and Winter Soldier show that I did not like at all. And so, and I thought was poorly written. Just a lot of uh, there was a lot of issues with that show. Um, and I could probably spend all day talking about it, but it was just a mess. I mean, it was all over the place. And so I don't feel very optimistic for this one. And I would say I am firmly in the fearful camp here. And from what I've heard from this movie, I've heard, as of like 2 or 3 weeks ago, they're having to do more reshoots because apparently their test screenings have done really poorly. Um, I mean, this is a movie that's supposed to come out, what, February, I think?
Yeah.
And it doesn't sound like they're ready to put something out that's going to be coherent. And so, I mean, some good actors: Harrison Ford, Giancarlo Esposito, um, obviously Anthony Mackie as Falcon. I mean, there's some potential here, but I don't see this one doing anything at all. I think it's going to be another big bomb for Marvel. If I had to make a prediction, I just don't see. I have not heard enough good things and have not seen enough good coming out of this one to really believe anything more than that.
Yeah, the cast is amazing. Harrison Ford, Giancarlo Esposito, Anthony Mackie. I was trying to quickly look up the rest of the cast. Like Tyler is in there. Just all in all, just a very strong cast. It also sounds like they're recasting the Falcon. I didn't realize that. Danny Ramirez is listed as Falcon, so I assume that they're making him take the mantle. I just don't really understand or really know how this fits into the MCU. Like, how does Harrison Ford, who's Red Hulk, get to be the president? Right? That's not mentioned whatsoever. What's Anthony Mackie done since Endgame? Like, what? So that, I mean, it's just, I know that they had the Falcon TV show. I think that was that after Endgame? My timeline gets all messed
Yeah,
up.
it did because he was basically him dealing with the fallout from Steve Rogers retiring and giving him the shield, and the whole show was kind of about him and Bucky sort of finding their way uh, after that. And so that's kind of I can't remember how long after, but I feel like it was because I remember we had Endgame in, was it December, and then Spider-Man Far From Home came out in like February, and I feel like this show came out the same year that uh, maybe that that Far From Home came out. Maybe it was a year later, but I don't think it was much longer after Endgame.
I think it was like a few months before after Endgame. I think like Endgame came out in like July or something, like June or July, and then I think like September probably the Falcon came out. WandaVision I think also came out around that time. I remember them like going back. I remember having to watch both of them at the same time when new episodes came out. They were kind of doing like double dipping. Um, I like Anthony Mackie, and I loved him as the Falcon. I have no issue with him being Captain America. Again, like you said, I know it's not comic book accurate, but um, I kind of, my hot take is I kind of wish Fantastic Four were released before this movie. Um,
Yes, and I think Marvel probably needs that because I don't think this is the movie you want to lead off
no.
your year this year.
Um,
I just don't think
and
people care enough, really, and I just don't think you're hearing good enough things about it.
Well, I also haven't really seen much about it. Like I've seen Fantastic Four stuff out there, like the Disney Expo, or they're where they did things at Comic Con too. Like they brought the flying car in on for Fantastic Four and all of this, and you're not really seeing much about it. There's not any release trailers. I honestly did not even know that it was coming out next month. I thought this was like a March, April type of movie. I haven't seen a cinematic trailer on it outside of the one where you see Harrison Ford come out as the Red Hulk outside of the White House. Like, I haven't really seen much. So put me in the fearful category with this one. I think that this is, again, I just don't think that this is the movie that Marvel should be leading off. And I know they probably couldn't change their timeline on it, but I just, I don't know.
Well, I
I'm
don't
nervous
know
about
that.
it.
I don't think that Fantastic Four is done yet. I think that's part of it. Is there? I think they may be done filming, but I don't know that they've finished. Like this one was a more finished product, and it's. I mean, it's been in the works for a long time. Like I want to say, like 29 or 2021 or 2022 was when they announced and started pre-production stuff, something like that. And they've renamed the movie or two or three different times. It was New World Order, and then it was something else, and then now it's Brave New World, and they've had multiple rounds of reshoots apparently. So I think they might have changed directors at one point. I'm trying to remember exactly because I was looking at the director for this. It's Julius Ona, which I'm not familiar with him. I looked at some of his credits, and he really the only thing on there that I recognized was, and I haven't seen the movie, but the only one on there I recognized was the Cloverfield paradox, and which was not super well received compared to some of the other Cloverfield stuff. But um, I don't know. That's to me, it's risky having bringing in a guy with that much inexperience and with no credits to really anything like this. Um, I mean, I think they would have been better off bringing it back like the Russo brothers, who directed the first or the second and third Captain America, and obviously Infinity War and Endgame. So, but I think this one may be this one could very well be, because it's been in the works so long, the last of the sort of sucky MCU stuff that we've gotten the last few years. Maybe this like, hey, we've already put the money into it. We've spent millions of dollars. We have to release it, get it out there, get it out of the way. Maybe that's what they're thinking starting in February. Um, and I think they're just hoping that they can pick up more traction um, from Fantastic Four. But like honestly, I don't think Thunderbolts is going to do that well either. Like I expect this one. I predict this one and Thunderbolts will both bomb to some degree or another, because Thunderbolts suffers from the problem of having a bunch of characters that nobody really cares about, outside of maybe Bucky being the only one in that maybe people care about. So I certainly have no interest in watching it really. But
Which is
you know,
surprising because you're a Captain America guy.
I mean, I am. I mean, my favorite um, MCU character was Iron Man in terms of the ones that from Phase One all the way till through Endgame. But but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't. I don't feel good about this one at all, and I don't see, based on all that we've been hearing, how this is gonna do particularly well. So, but we'll see. I could be wrong. Let's look at our last movie here. This is Mission Impossible, technically 8. Um, I think originally it was going to be Dead Reckoning Part 2. They actually changed it, I think, to the Final Reckoning. I guess they'll change Dead Reckoning, instead of it saying Part 1, it'll just say Dead Reckoning. But um, I'm going to preface this one. I'm going to say I'm hopeful for this one, and I'm going to use that. That's going to be something that, for those who've watched my review of this movie of Dead Reckoning, which was actually, I think, the second ever video that we did on this channel, funnily enough, about a year and a half ago. Um, I was not the biggest fan of Dead Reckoning. Um, Huge fan of really most of the first 6 movies. Fallout was number 6, being my favorite of those. Um, 1 and 2 are decent. but 3 through 6 I absolutely love, and so 7 obviously I was really excited for, and it ended up being one of my of probably of all the more recent ones from 3 to 6. I would have rated it below all four of those, and I think that's what I did in the rankings that we did kind of in that video. But yeah, I feel like the story was a little underwhelming. Obviously, the action set pieces were great. I mean, that's what they do. I mean, that's what Tom Cruise does with these movies. Um, it looks fantastic. Had some fun new characters, but I think it just fell flat on the story beats compared to like a Fallout or a Rogue Nation or a Ghost Protocol, whatever it might be. I just feel like those had stronger narratives, and this one to me just felt a little lacking on that front. But that being said, the reason I am hopeful for this one is because um, I think this being the supposed to be the final Mission Impossible movie, I think they will do everything they can to make sure that they hit all the right beats in terms of like the character arcs, bringing all those to a satisfying conclusion. Um, because I think where this movie will excel will not be carrying on the plot from Dead Reckoning. I think where it'll excel is giving each of these characters that we've known for so long like satisfying conclusions to their stories. And so that's why I'm hopeful because I'm interested to see where they go, and I think they're gonna. It's gonna. I feel like it's gonna feel a lot like Top Gun Maverick in a lot of ways, where they're gonna find ways to really give satisfying send offs to all of these characters, and um, I'm just very interested to see where they go with it. And the trailer looks fantastic. Like it just looks like it's going to be tons of fun, and that's why I love seeing these kind of movies. And Tom Cruise is the goat in terms of current still acting actors, really. So, um, you know, that's kind of where I'm at with it.
See, I I'm fearful on it for the same reasons that you just said, since it is the final one. I and a lot of the times with these like wrap up movies, especially ones that have gone on so long, such as Mission Impossible, it's hard to find a satisfying end, which makes the fan bases kind of mad because they expect it to go a certain way and it doesn't. And a lot of the times it makes fans not like it, or it makes fans love it because they do it right. Um, and I think this is much more of a 50-50 as far as, do you do it the way that the fan base wants, or do you not? Um, and I just think that wrapping up a I don't even know how long they've been doing Mission Impossible movies. I mean, it's got to
I
be
think
over
the
a
first one
decade.
was
Yeah,
'96, maybe.
like almost 2 decades
Yeah,
worth of movies. I just find I think it's going to be hard to do it the way that the fans want and the way that people will find as reasonable. That way, that's why I'm fearful of of this movie.
well, and I think you know. Sorry, I'm gonna go ahead and snap these in here. You know, I think that what I think the reason I'm more optimistic is because they, uh, Tom Cruise. You look at all of his movies where he's kind of. I look at Top Gun. I mean, a movie that I enjoy the first Top Gun more than the second, but I really liked the second one. Um, that was something that was decades. The movie came out in what the '80s or something. Almost 40 years later, a movie that nobody really asked for a sequel for, yet they were able to bring it back and do a really good job of sort of tying up some story threads and stuff. But with this one, it's like you don't really have that problem where people are very familiar with this series. You went on a really nice streak from 3 through 6 where you had really solid movies every time, and then with 6 being my favorite in the series. But then to me, you get to 7, and you run into where maybe I would be a little fearful would be the John Wick sort of dilemma where John Wick got to its final movie or supposed final movie, and there was just so much excess and so much. Everything just felt, every action sequence felt 15, 20 minutes too long, and every fight sequence felt the same way, and the story was underwhelming and sort of subverted the expectations they set from John Wick 3. And so I'm a little fearful that of that kind of creeping its way into this one. But I feel like because Dead Reckoning had a lot of that and maybe didn't do as well as they would have liked it to, I think they'll they will make this a more personal, character driven, uh, emotional send off, to where they'll really focus on the interactions between these characters that we've known since their very first Mission Impossible, and like them having to work together one more time to figure out how to save the day and beat the villain and everything. And so that's what I'm thinking they're going to try to do. Obviously, there's still going to be great action sequences, but I think that's where I'm more hopeful, because I just think that they might try to ground it a little bit more and focus just on these characters and give them, the send off they deserve. But I could be wrong. It could be a different direction than that. So, all right. Well, I think that's all of our movies. I will say, for those watching, if you want to support the channel, please give us a like, a subscribe, comment. Uh, Going into the new year, we really want to start getting more of this out there, advertising, hopefully more on social media and places like that. But we really appreciate it if you could support us and help us grow this channel, because we really enjoy it. But we obviously, it's a part-time thing, so having your support makes it that much easier for us to do more of this. So